died in battle before, and you just toss her. You cast a spell, or you toss her Phoenix down. So
it's one of those things. Yeah, as far as musings and conspiracies. Sorry, everyone in Twitch world. We're finally back on audio land.
Also known as Dyson.
So it's one of those things where you want to be able to just do a quick fix of it. It was super frustrating playing through that game and not being able to do that, basically. So it still is to this day.
It seems like there should have been. And Ross, I know you have your own idea about this, and I'm going to let you do that here in just a second because it would make sense. But it seems like there should have been some sort of quick explanation as to maybe Sephiroth's sword was permanent in the death that it gave, or I don't know. It seems like there would have been an easy fix for explaining such a large, it was such a obvious glaring issue.
Yeah.
That seemed like they could have said, hey, who's got an idea of how to, wrap this up really quick and make this so it makes sense.
Especially, and I think this was the case not just in other games, but also in this game, and regular battles with regular monsters and even bosses afterward, if a party member had actually died in battle, after the battle was complete, they would have gained back 1 HP or 1 health point and had been magically revived by no action of your own.
Mm-hmm.
So again, that inconsistency is a little mind-boggling.
It is. And Eris is just one example in the Final Fantasy games.
Yeah, it's a crucial one, though.
It is. It totally is. And especially for as big of a deal as it was made to be in that game.
Yep.
It was a love interest. It was... Final Fantasy characters had died before in games, but...
Not at that level.
No.
Not at that kind of moment where you've worked on that character, built them strong, and she was a very powerful character. And
You're
then
a healer.
It just gets, that's the thing, and then it just gone, and
Peace.
And there's a different sense of finality with that death. In other games where, various characters had died, in some instances they'd come back for a little bit and maybe died again.
In a weird afterlife sense or something, and
so they do that.
Yep.
So that was a real big one that just is a sore thumb in the whole series. Is why can't we fix that easily? I'm trying to think of other ones that come to mind. There's a million, that we could talk about. The whole underwater breathing thing, as far as the Blitzball. We kind of talked about that last episode. Did you have a little list you were working on?
Yeah, definitely. Oh, what do you think? I had to do something during the second period.
Get on the bones there.
Going back to that with the medicinal properties of a Phoenix Down, being able to counteract what would have otherwise been a ho-hum death to bring him back. There are also other areas in Final Fantasy where this has happened, and I'm thinking at Final Fantasy II, the United States Final Fantasy II, in the very beginning of the game, when Cecil and Rydia go into the town and Rosa is sick, and you have to go and get this, I think it's a sand ruby, from this cave to heal her. Well, it's like she's a white mage.
Mm-hmm. Why can't?
Why doesn't Inazuna? Why doesn't that cure what she has? Now, here's what I understand about this. You don't know exactly what she has. Same idea could be applied to our world today. Well, if you there's vaccinations against things like polio, but if just because we have that doesn't necessarily mean that we have something. If you have cancer, you can't just be like, oh, here's this for cancer. So you don't know exactly what she has. So I understand that. But even in that game, when Palom and Param turn themselves to stone to keep the walls of the kingdom from crushing in on the party, well, you use a soft? Why can't you use a Zuna?
Well, and to go off of that, that's a similar scene in number 9, right? Where the evil force turns completely into stone, and there's a character that gets caught as you're all running out of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you do end up using, isn't it just the normal soft item?
I don't
Yeah.
think it's a normal
Or-
soft.
Well, it's,
There's
it's super soft. It's,
Okay,
yeah.
sorry, yeah. But same idea is, why can't we just use that? Okay, so I guess that was bad examples for that, but
No, it's not though, because in that moment they had a way of making it so it's like, well, why don't you just use a soft? I mean, just go into the forest really quick and give them a soft. No, there was something to tie into why you couldn't do that. You had to get, because of the forest and because of whatever, how just powerful it was, you had to get that additional item.
right.
So it did close that loophole, whereas it didn't in the other games. So I
Yeah,
think that
they
did a
thought
good
that
job.
one through. They kind of were like back of the drawing board. Okay, that makes sense. We should probably write that in the story here this time around.
So now, Ross, I know that you have a theory about the Eris thing, and I want you to touch on that really quick.
Yeah.
And give your this is more of the conspiracy.
Sure, yeah, and yeah, there's a whole bunch of those too.
Yeah, just a preference. This isn't necessarily my theory. I mean, these have been discussed
Yeah.
over and over and over
Ad
for the past-
nauseum.
for the past 20 plus years. So going back to Eris's death, and essentially what happens is Sephiroth stabs her through the back with his saber, his sword, goes straight through her body. She collapses, and then there's a cutscene where Cloud, the protagonist of the game, is lowering her into body. And at this point, we're under the assumption that she has already passed. He lets her go, and she drifts away, just like Jack in Titanic, essentially.
The door was big enough for both of them.
Just never let go. But so the theory is, the conspiracy here is that Cloud, actually, a grief-stricken Cloud, is actually the person that killed Eris. So going, rest in peace, Eris. Yeah.
It's not that far from. I don't think that's too far of a stretch, man.
Well, no. So if you play through the game and you see the cutscene where Sephiroth stabs her through, he stabs her low enough through. You're not hitting any vital organs. You're not hitting any lungs or
Cats.
Cats.
Sorry.
Monkey.
Yeah, wild cat in here. But it's really shouldn't have actually killed her enough to knock her out, enough to leave her unconscious. Yes. And then it gets to the point where Cloud is so grief-stricken, he's not thinking sensically. And throughout that game, I mean, Cloud is a perfect example of mental instability. I
was gonna say, yeah, not only mental instability, but if you've played through the Crisis Core, it just exacerbates that fact. So
not only does he go crazy for part of the game, where he's literally, in an insane asylum, essentially, in a wheelchair, unable to function. For the majority of the game, he thinks he's someone else. He's essentially schizophrenic.
Yeah. So it is not too far to say that. Yeah.
Absolutely not. Especially mix in the grief element. I think there's definitely a chance, weight to this theory that he, in the moment, actually lowered a unconscious Eris into the water and let her drown, which is really
that's a
dark.
That is dark.
Yeah, that's an interesting conspiracy though to kind of go off of. Colin, did you have any thoughts on that one? Because
well, I think that if you were to consider that Eris was in some sort of shock or something where when she is drifting down below, that she is not cognizant of my breathing has completely gone, then I think what Ross talks about with Cloud's mental instability throughout that game, where it's not just a one-hit thing. It's not like, oh man, it's kind of crazy. It is a factor. It's a huge factor in the game.
It plays a huge role.
And like we talked about earlier, these characters are very young. So something that traumatic is going to have such a bigger effect on somebody who is very young rather than somebody who has matured mentally more, has been through more life experiences. I mean, that's essentially your best friend and your number one love interest dying at 17.
Right.
And that's, you know, I mean, we
It's
were
gonna
all,
mess with you.
we were all 17 once.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great point to bring up. Whether it's true or not, who knows? But I think that the loophole that is created by the simple Phoenix down or casting life
Yeah.
is like, well,
Anything.
Yeah, give me something to close up that loophole so I, don't have to worry about that,
Yeah.
because it seems such a obvious solution.
Right.
And Scooter, like you said, in Final Fantasy IX, they have to get the super soft.
Mm-hmm.
They close the loophole by giving an explanation.
In the story somewhere there, and
Yep.
that was not a conspiracy quite, but it was one of those things I remember just going like, oh, why don't we just use a soft right here? Like,
Yeah, exactly.
And then the story kind of completed it, but yeah.
Yeah,
There's a lot of situations like that.
yeah,
I think it could have been as simple as like, I mean, going into that dungeon or that part of the game, like losing all your items or something, like some event, like, oh, your items are gone, or
sure.
yeah. I mean, just something to tie the loop.
Wouldn't be the first time in a game where all of a sudden you don't have your items.
Yeah.
For whatever reason. Talking about earlier when we were talking about the vaccination, the polio, but we don't have a cure for cancer now, and talking about the sand ruby and having to cure the white mage of a disease that you think that she would otherwise be able to
She built
cure.
up an immunity.
Well, that begs the question, like medicine today, the technologically medicine is always improving. Is magic the same way? Is Azuna just the best for what they got at that moment? Is the medicinal properties of magic a continual, is it on a spectrum? Is it always,
Yeah, no, I know what you're saying.
Because
Going back to what we're talking about, like for instance in number 10, so Yuna's father was also a summoner. He probably learned all the same spells that Yuna did as you go through it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So does she learn a better version than her dad did, one generation before? Or is it that she has to relearn basically the wheel?
Sure.
That's a good world kind of question as far as,
It's always tabbed to
know.
be some ancient magic.
It seems that ancient magic, and they say ancient, it's been around since the beginnings of the gods and all of that.
Mhm.
So, I don't know. I think a lot of them might just be cyclical, or like we were saying before, it just repeats itself over and over. Where you start out and you kind of like as you play through the game, I guess through time you learn and grow in that realm of magic, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't think in a lot of these games it technologically advances, like like you're saying. I don't know.
Yeah. And that's just amusing. Does it or will it?
Right.
If you were to go 1,000 years into the future on the blue planet, as it's known in Final Fantasy II, is there a cure for Rosa's condition that magic has, over time, magic has developed and magic has progressed, that whatever she has, you no longer need that sand ruby to cure because now your white mages have those spells.
That ability. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't know if magic it has a further progression on a spectrum that there is more to learn about it,
Right.
or if it is, I don't know.
That might be one of those video game things where you just kind of accept it.
Yeah.
And you question it, but yeah, it's a weird one to think about.
It is. Let's see, just other little musings that I have is, you talk about silly things like, who's making potions that you can buy 99?
There's an alchemist just in the back room.
There's no
Yep.
influx in price.
Oh, yeah.
Economics.
Oh,
is,
no, it's government subsidied, so it's
Oh, so
yeah.
it's just eat everything.
It's like
Nobody's okay.
yeah,
So that
$1.60 a bag.
it would be an interesting thing to see the capitalist version of markets in a Final Fantasy game.
Lord knows that capitalism is dead in Final Fantasy. It is all communism.
It is all some sort of social state-run madness.
Fair prices for all.
Fair
Never
prices
goes up, never goes down.
Yeah. We see Mr. Dyston says Ultros is an underrated Final Fantasy boss, and that's from Final Fantasy III in the United States. He is the octopus thing that you fight at the
Oh,
beginning on the
yeah.
river rafting,
Oh, yeah.
and he
I
also
forgot
shows
about
up.
that.
He also shows up during the opera, I believe.
Ooh.
And I think he is. I think he is underrated, and he is difficult.
Well, early on in that game, absolutely, right?
Oh, in the beginning of that
Ye-
game when you're having to do that that river rafting tour,
I do remember it took me more than one time.
that is tough.
Yeah.
Him showing up at the opera didn't make a whole lot of sense.
So getting back to musings, it's like, what are you doing in an opera?
What are you doing at an opera, octopus man?
Well, see,
I don't know.
now, that's one of those, though, that I honestly
Stay in
need-
your lane.
Yeah.
Stay in your lane.
Why are you in the story right now?
Let's see. I found this book. I know that I've showed you guys. I found this book at Target. It has to do with it's Final Fantasy Ultimania Archive, and it's volume 1, and it has games 1 through 6 on it, and it has so many of the different characters and talks about backstories and the way that the game was set up in creation, as far as some of the formulas. As far as some of the formulas that they go in battle, it's really awesome.
That's
Art-
so
art
cool.
design,
That
yeah.
does what my iPhone does, just in more time. I'm just joking.
But this didn't cost you $30, man.
I'm checking my phone for free right now. So what are you looking up?
I'm
The
looking.
formulas
Well,
for,
no. I was just
No, no,
enjoying,
no.
Quick.
just enjoying.
No, it is a
taking look
nice-
Oh, looking up Ultros here.
Okay, you know what? Guess what? You don't get to look at it. You don't get to look at it.
The future
Um,
versus the past.
Hey,
There
like
you go.
Ultros, you're a jerk. The
Well-
jerk store called. They're running out of you. All right, so that is a good point, and that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Why Ultros shows up? At the opera? I'm not really sure why he does, but let's take a look. A lot of these characters in a very short while, a very short time. I mean, it probably took you, 60 hours to beat Final Fantasy VII? I would probably say 60 hours. And you rest a lot at inns and stuff like that. But what do you think in 60 hours? How many days eclipse in the
man.
world based on all of the times you stay at an inn?
Oof.
40 days?
Maybe.
Through the whole campaign
Yeah,
of the
maybe
game.
40 days.
40 days you go from let's say 50, 60, let's say 100 days. 100 days eclipse from when you go to a level 1 ex-soldier schmo or barkeep to defeating a god.
0 to hero.
0 to hero in about 100 days.
I'm taking what Square Enix did with the Kingdom Hearts, just collaborating with Disney here.
I mean,
0 to hero.
that's essentially what it is. And for the time that eclipses, I mean, realistically,
That's like me becoming a 220 marathoner in a month.
in 100 days.
100 days, yeah.
In 100 days.
Not going to happen.
Chris, how did you do that?
Oh, it took about 100 days.
He has long legs.
Classic.
Let
He
everyone,
grew.
Let everyone know. He grew.
So, and that is such a silly thing to even talk.
No, it's not, because it makes sense as far as another kind of thing, as far as a weird, amusing of how these games are played, because typically in real lifetime, that's the thing with these Final Fantasy games, you sit down, especially as a kid, and you realize you open it up for the PlayStation, and there's 4 CDs.
Mm-hmm.
This is not a 1 CD game, and not a 2 CD game. There's 4 CDs for this one game, so you're in for a long game. And it can easily take up to 100 days in a first playthrough as a kid. So the real life time, I could see how that correlates pretty closely to what you're saying is in-game time for the characters as they go through the story. Some of them honestly feel like they took longer than 100 days. Maybe more in the order of a year or two.
It's like you go from 0 to world beater.
Yeah.
in
Top of the.
No, pick your period of time.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's going to be ever a point in my lifetime where I am the most powerful being on this planet.
Yeah,
I'm
wouldn't
pretty
hold your breath.
confident, and I'm
Ross, you're doing
sure
pretty
my
good
ability.
in life, man. Feel better about yourself. Like you're.
I just don't know if I'm
you,
gonna
but
be.
you're no world beater.
Well, it's like you become rich, you become powerful, you learn all the magic there is to learn.
And you're there to save the world. You are.
That
So-
would be equivalent to Bryce becoming in 100 days as good as Earl Thomas
Mhm.
at free safety.
Not gonna
I
happen.
mean, world beater, legit world beater.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, but when you guys talk about like this impending doom, they don't have like if you were to like relate it to actual real world, like
Yeah.
you only have
a
certain amount of time,
Right,
so like
right.
you have to like
Finite.
adapt to that.
No, it's absolutely
Especially
true.
if that becomes like your one main focus, then yes, like you could see those jumps in like from 0 to hero, but
out of necessity,
yeah, out of necessity.
I guess
Interesting.
because you have a finite timeline.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
You're not gonna like this.
I'll buy that.
Yeah.
I'll buy that.
How long did it take them in that what is it, Armageddon with Bruce Willis, right? How long did it take those cowboys to become NASA's astronauts? Like a week?
Yeah, like they sped up
So
the
there
process.
you go. They leveled up in a week. They played the quick and dirty version, I guess.
Because you had to.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I could see that, I guess. It's a weird thing in the video game though. You're right. Like how quickly you go from nothing to
Superhero.
Oh, yeah.
And there's money in the bank, and you got 15 gun blades just sitting on your side backpack, and a black chocobo, a green one, a red one. So, yeah.
Hey, so here's my last musing that I really thought, man, that's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
So the fact that summons aren't more powerful
Oh, sure.
is questionable. The fact that a punch from somebody can do the same as a larger than life dragon, or let me take it one step further, certain attacks just don't make sense. Sephiroth, when he's one wing angel, I mean, he blows up the solar system,
Yeah. No, that animation is.
and it does 90% of your damage. It can't kill you. That attack cannot kill you. It's not programmed to kill you. If you have 10 HP left and he uses that, you'll go down to 1. If you have 20, you'll go down to 2.
That's
It will
another
not kill you.
Weird game mechanic.
It is a weird game mechanic considering the finality
Mm-hmm.
and the severity.
And how much the story evolves around it, and it would make sense that attack would just end it all, right?
Maybe he just appreciates irony. Like, this should kill you, but I'm just going to bring you down to 10%.
He is a weird character, and if you play Crisis Core, he comes up a lot. He's a main character in that one, and he's a guy that would do that. He would just mess with you like that, though.
So that is weird. And hey, I'm just reading up here. Let's just talk
Yeah.
about this really quick. The love story of Titus and Yuna. Is it the most convincing of the Final Fantasy games?
No, well.
So what do you mean by
the most?
convincing?
I guess the one that would most make you think, yeah, that is a story unto itself.
I don't think so for me. When I think of like a love story, like a traditional love story, even outside of Final Fantasy, it's like a individual goes through like almost like a metamorphosis. Like the love that they're experiencing or the love story that they're a part of almost changes the very fabrics of who they are as a being.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that necessarily happened for either one of those individuals. I'm trying to think of a good example in the series.
Well, I mean, but okay, if we were to go back and talk a little bit more about how Seven and Eris did, like again, Cloud's mental stability changed because of that interaction and love story with Eris at that point, right? So maybe that is man, that's
His character evolves
a
substantially
lot.
throughout
Yeah, a lot
throughout those 4
differently.
discs.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
Tales old as time.
that's the thing.
Mixing in that Disney again.
I think that probably maybe one of the most convincing ones for me would that I really thought that's something right there is Zidane and Princess Garnet.
Yeah.
That one's an easy one. Yeah.
I
It's
I
your
bought that.
classic Disney, but it worked because the story arc for him, it changed him. Like
Mm-hmm.
to and as
I
Yeah.
bought that.
It
more
is
than
very
I bought
cliche,
Titus.
though. I mean, the princess and then
It
the
absolutely is,
the
but
thief.
it
The
absolutely
thief
works.
coming from
you know,
like
rags
Robin
to
Hood.
riches.
yeah, no, but it absolutely worked, and they did a really good job at it. So
You know, and I think that I don't buy Titus in Yuna as much because I don't buy Titus as a character.
Yeah.
He's a-
that, yeah, no.
he-
Well, that was their first foray into voice acting, and audio is a whole nother realm, which I would love to do an episode on. Is audio.
Oh, we shall.
And music and all that. But I love the guy that did it. He's done a lot of good voice acting. It was just, I mean, the famous laugh, or half laugh, you know. So yeah, that like was just it. It was good. It was good. He just didn't. I didn't buy. I didn't.
Well, he
bite.
didn't have any authenticity about his character,
That's
so
the
he
thing.
wasn't relatable.
Yeah.
I mean, he was like weird, like kind of creepily vulnerable.
It was weird,
and
but
I don't know.
He was
Yeah.
kind of an archetype of main characters that kind of really.
For how much I did not identify with this character, I'm
Yeah.
surprised how much I really enjoyed number 10.
yeah.
Sure.
I think the other characters
Yeah.
were so strong.
Oh man.
And I mean, thinking about it now,
Waka,
I mean,
you know,
the characters that talked the least identified with the most, Kimari
Orin.
or
Yeah.
Orin.
Yeah.
I mean,
Kimari,
both those
yeah.
characters. I mean, every single time Orin spoke, I mean,
just like, oh, what is he gonna say?
it's all magic. It's like you don't
Yeah.
need a reason to
Yeah,
help
you-
somebody.
Yeah, he did not mince words and he did not waste them. And I think I agree with you. And I don't know. Yuna was an okay character, but she was kind of just like mopey. I felt.
Even Yuna, she lacked. I mean, if I was the Faith, it's like, who is this girl? I'm not giving her
Yeah.
my soul so she can create a summon. It's like,
No, and in 12, you know, there was so many overarching characters, love interests, you know, because there's so much, there's such a big cast in that one. None that really stood out necessarily. 13, again, we don't know. 14 online, you guys might be able to talk on that one. 15, 15 was in a weird way a reminiscent remake of 7, and I didn't like it. I did not like the love story in that one at all.
Yeah.
It was there.
Yeah.
It's fine. It played its part. I could have done without it, to be honest.
I don't even remember it, to be honest.
That's
That's
the
how
thing. Is that
insignificant
it
it
was
was.
such a just like, oh, okay.
I remember loving the end of 15 when they're up in the throne, and I remember loving that.
Oh,
But
sure.
didn't. Yeah, the love story didn't reminisce with me, and I couldn't tell you.
And it was just a remake of 7 in a weird way. So you know,
all right, we're bouncing around a little bit.
we are.
All right.
Conspiracies, musings.
Conspiracies and musings. Ross, I know you got some good conspiracy stuff. That's like really kind of let's talk about and connect these dots.
All right, let us connect.
What do we got? Connect them dots.
So I'll start off with the musing that becomes a conspiracy. So I mean, kind of how we talked about Eris. I mean, how she shouldn't have died. Characters that should have died. I mean, Squall was stabbed in the chest with an icicle, a huge icicle beam, if you will.
Yeah.
And somehow he lives. It's like you're at the end of disc 1.
Oh,
He's
that's
fallen off of a platform
And the sorceress comes and just throws this rod of ice
all the way
straight
through.
you.
I mean, it is like it has to be at least half a foot in diameter. This icicle.
Yep.
And it just runs them straight through. And the next thing you know, you're waking up in a prison. It's like, what the heck just happened? Like,
Yeah.
even if you have a Phoenix down, it's
yeah,
like,
Phoenix
I don't know
down.
if the Phoenix down can fix that.
Oh, it can't fix a sword.
Yeah, can't fix a
That's
sword.
Can't fix a
so-
simple
yeah,
blade.
So
Yeah. And who, yeah, anyway.
no, keep building off that. You were saying like
So that gets me to the conspiracy. And again, this is not my original thought. This has been talked about. This has been discussed
I don't think I've heard this.
immensely. I mean, again, this has been
Discussed ad nauseum.
discussed as nauseum over the past 20 years, literally 20 years, because it came out in 98. So the conspiracy is that Squall actually died at the end of disc 1.
I have
So
never
the,
heard this.
The
This
rest
is
of the game, he's actually dead, and you're playing. The rest of the game is played out the space between alive and death. So that those
That
moments
moment.
between you actual death and you disappear from this world, that
Wait.
near death experience or just seeing your life
When
flash
your
before
life
eyes.
flashes. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it seems kind of, it's like, okay, that doesn't make any sense. But if you think about it, 8 was a weird game.
No, it is a weird game, but explain that again. So the rest of the game after disc 1, you're playing as a flashback, or how does that work?
No. Your whole life, like, and then when I say whole life, your future life flashes before your eyes. And it's almost like a dream. It's almost like it's what Squall would have wanted in his life. Because, for instance, before that moment in disc 1 where he gets stabbed through with the icicle, where no one's not into him,
Right.
she's totally into Cypher.
Right.
He's an afterthought after disc 1.
The
Totally
whole
into
story
him.
changes.
It's a
towards
love
him.
story after that.
Yeah.
Same thing with Cypher. Cypher's character changes. Disc 1, he's kind of this.
He becomes the almost second in command. You know.
Yeah, but I mean, in disc 1, he's the anti-hero.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
he's still conflicted. He's a good guy, but he's does bad things and he does them his own way. And then disc 2 through disc 4, he's all bad guy. It's like, when did that happen? What changed?
Yeah. You had a night. Yeah.
And then there's things that just, I mean, there's so many things in it that just don't make sense, like the Moombas and Squall's headaches and his flashbacks of Laguna and all these different things. Like, what is this? And I think, I mean, in reading about number 8, and if you've played number 8, there's a lot of things that just frustrate players compared to number 7, because number 7 was just a true, all the way good RPG, and 8 was just like, oh, that was a little odd.
It was much different. Yeah, the way they presented the story and the game was much different.
And it would make a lot more sense if we were thinking it's like, okay, this is actually, Squall's dead, and this is almost like a dream. This is a dream state for him.
I've never thought of it that way, though. That's really interesting.
It is. It's a heck of a conspiracy.
Yeah. So again, not my thought. And then there's tons of theories, that actually have been confirmed and theories that have been disproved, but I still like to think about them as if they were not disproved.
Right.
So maybe and the Squall one has been disproved, but the story creators, actually, they were interviewed about just that exact conspiracy, and they thought about actually incorporating it into the 8 remake. If they will or not, who's to say? They probably won't, but the fact that they're like, oh, interesting, that would actually be a cool take.
I mean, because my brain is just like mulling over that whole story now, going, oh man, geez, like, you know, that adds another layer of depth that might be really
Squall being the most powerful by far. I mean, him leveling up faster than anyone else. Like,
throughout towards the end of that game,
he was
always. You can't do anything about that. Even in if you try to play, you know, as people do speed runs or one level character runs, like you can't do that in that game because Squall will always be the most powerful out of the entire.
And that was
party.
the only Final Fantasy that did that.
Yeah, I know. It was a weird one.
Weird leveling scaling system.
Were they trying to tell us more?
All right, so getting to a Final Fantasy that's actually been proved, or a conspiracy that's been proven. A lot of Final Fantasy worlds, they come by different names, whether it's Gaia or the Blue Planet, Spira, whatever. Some of them have been linked, and some of them even have been believed to be the same world.
Well, do any of them, like a lot of the gods in Norse mythology? Sorry.
Well, they all shared various mythologies. It's not just Norse. I mean, some of it's like, Saudi Arabian.
Did any of the world names and all that tie together with that stuff, or is it all? I don't know anything about that.
So what ties together? Not necessarily the names. Well, the names do. I'll get to that in a little bit. But what I'm talking about now is Final Fantasy X. So Final Fantasy X and X2 are the same world as Final Fantasy 7.
Same
same world,
same characters through timeline and all.
Yep. So no, not the same timeline. So Final Fantasy X and X2 are actually a distant past to Final Fantasy 7.
Explain why.
Explain why. So I go out. I don't necessarily agree with the full theory. The full theory is that it's a different world. It's just the same universe. I think it's the same world. So in Final Fantasy X2, and actually, believe it or not, I played far enough into X2 to get to this part. And I say that for people that have not played. It was compared to Final Fantasy X.
No, it's not.
X2 was a terrible game.
Yeah. Well, it was marketed at a totally different audience.
I don't know what audience that was. It wasn't me though.
Yeah, no, it wasn't us.
It wasn't 16-year-old me.
No.
That was the truth. But anyway, so late in the game, you get to a point where you meet a character named Shinra, and he's an Al Bhed, and he talks about his idea and his concept to fuel the world to run cities off of the world's energy. So essentially
I do
tapping
remember
into
that, actually.
the far
I do
plane
remember
in
that.
the Final Fantasy X and X2 games, and then fueling civilizations or cities. And Shinra is significant because we've already talked about Final Fantasy VII. The big bad company of Final Fantasy VII is the Shinra Company,
Right.
Incorporated, and they, just as I said just now in Final Fantasy X2, fuel cities off of the world's energy, which
Right, the
eventually
life
gets them
stream.
the live stream, which eventually gets them into trouble.
Right. And okay, and I mean, geez, I'm just thinking of other parallels I could draw between the two real quick. Is Sin, the giant, let's just call it Godzilla type monster that causes havoc in 10. In 7, you have the weapons, right? What,
Yep.
quote unquote weapons, which are basically the same idea.
Absolutely.
All right, go on.
So that's the main connection there, the Shinra, and that has actually been confirmed.
yeah, I
That
could see
was
that.
the writers for 10 purposely put that in there.
Gosh dang it! Now I'm
to
gonna
have
be
that
thinking
connection.
about this whole like, how do these two stories connect, and like.
And there's other things you could draw from
Ugh.
that probably aren't necessarily connections, but it's like Ronso's
no,
a
yeah.
distant ancestor to Red 13.
Sure.
I mean, yeah, one's blue, one's red, but
Hojo did a lot of weird, genetic experiments and all
Yeah.
that, as far as the Mako energy and all that. Like, so, oh man.
So, talking about 10, because if 10 is the same world as, if that's the same world as 7, well, in 7, because of Sephiroth's supernova attack, you know that world is the same world that we are in. Because he burns through in that final, on a supernova attack, he burns through the solar system, and he goes from the outside in, and then once it starts getting close to Earth, then it starts going from the sun towards Earth. And the last thing that gets where the characters are, the last planet that before it gets burned up that's coming closer to the sun is the Earth. The Earth as we know it. So that's, then that 7 is the Earth that we live in. It's supposed to be the Earth that we live in. Because of that attack, that. And that means that 10-2 are going to be in the same Earth that we live in. Final Fantasy II for the Super Nintendo would also be that same world. That would be a connection there, because in Final Fantasy II, American 2, the world is known as the Blue Planet. And it's got the moon. It's got the same general properties as what we have here. And the Blue Planet has often been, at least amongst Final Fantasy fans or Final Fantasy conspirators. I don't know what that word exactly would be, but the Blue Planet is the planet as we know it as Earth. So if you connect 10 to 7, you connect 7 to us, and you connect 7 to 4. So that is something that is a little interesting there. So
For sure.
Continue on with your connections, because I know you got a few, and they're awesome.
No, absolutely. So, and then, going back to linking two at a time, so to speak. So, the original Final Fantasy, like the true Final Fantasy, number 1, and Final Fantasy 9. So
That's not that far off, though.
no, and so again, there's some definite linkages between the two games. One being the big baddie in Garland. Garland's the bad guy in both games, and something that's kind of alludes to his appearance in number 9.
Jeez.
At the end of number 1, Garland, after he has been defeated, in the epilogue, it says something along the lines of, and it's not a direct quote, but that Garland will be restored and will await the Warriors of Light of the future. And it's really ambiguous. Doesn't really go into a whole lot of explanation after that. Very vague. But obviously Garland reappears in number 9. Also in both, you have the, what are they called? The Guardians of Terra. So you have Tillamook, you have Lich. So
Kraken,
the various guardians
Yep.
you have to fight against. appear, and then they're the same exact Guardians in both 1 and 9.
And isn't there a weird time conspiracy as far as going to the future or traveling in the past in both games, right?
I think definitely in 1.
Number 1, but in number 9, you're traveling to your evil
Oh, that's
twins
true.
world
No, yeah, you're
at,
true.
the,
That's
at
true.
the end. I
That's
know
true.
number 1 did it much better, but number 9, at the very end of the game, you started delving into that Garland time-traveling world, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I could easily see the parallels between those two.
Yeah. And just to answer the question really quick, that's coming up on the chat, which series had the best bromance? For me, number 1 bromance, Zell and Squall. It was like grumpy old grandpa and grandpa. Zell was all about Squall, loved him to death, and Squall was just like, leave me alone.
Best bromance. Oh, dude, for me, because it has its ups and downs, and I can't believe you didn't say this. Cecil and Kane.
Well, so
Oh,
that was the obvious one. I figured you would take that one.
Okay, so Cecil and Kane, they both dig the same woman.
Oh, yeah.
Kane gets
Till as old as time.
gets a little jealous, decides to have his mind manipulated. Maybe not decides, but
Yeah.
he kind of gets the mind. But he
Manipulate
comes,
my mind.
well, he comes back and he says something to the effect, "Hey, if that," and he tells Cecil after he comes back from the brainwashing and kind of having his strings pulled by Garland. I'm sorry, by Golbez. He says, "Dude, if that ever happens again, just kill me. Don't give it a second thought.
Yeah.
Just straight up kill me." Which, I mean, that's deep.
Yeah.
But he recognizes the danger that he put his friends
Mhm.
through. He goes up, they go through the cave together. They do this terrible thing to this town together, blowing it up, delivering this package that burns this town down. But also, Kane is there when Cecil goes, "Dude, I'm done being the Dark Knight. I got to get right.
Yeah.
I need to go up and I need to face myself and do the paladin thing." And Kane's there.
Mm-hmm.
And this is going to be kind of a little bit off the chart, but going up there, when you get up to the top and you become a paladin, hold on. Actually, is Kane? I don't know. Actually, know if Kane's with you when you go up there. I might be totally off when you go up there. I can't.
I can't.
It's been a while.
It has been
It's been approximately 7 years since I've played it.
Hold on, let's see here. See if there's a. I can't remember if he goes up there with you because that totally blows up my entire
The conspiracy.
conspiracy right there. I'm not really sure, to be honest with you. I can't speak with confidence because you go up there. I don't know. Is there a way you can?
There is this thing called the internet.
There is this thing.
I
I'm
could-
trying
yeah,
to
we
go
could-
through a book like I'm at the library here.
Well, that's the way we prefer it.
Well, we are scholars. This is
Yeah.
academia.
We have a master among us of doctorates of sorts, right?
Yeah, we are a house
Something.
of learned doctors here. But I think that Kane and Cecil do have a great bromance amongst them or
Yeah.
about them.
Yeah, another quick answer for me would be 15 is an easy one to answer because it's basically a bromance of dudes taking a road trip in a car. So
That
like,
is true.
The interactions that you get. I don't know if you guys have done where you just put the car on auto drive and you just kind of watch them interact, and somebody, I won't say it, but they pass gas in the car and the other ones are all looking at them and you're like, so little things like that really add to the character feel of that. But that whole story is based around that one, so that would be an easy one.
That does definitely has. Camping every night. That does.
Yeah.
I definitely see, and I see up on the board here Gladius and Prompto. I think
those. I mean, they're total. It's a good character building story of those four, guys in a road trip kind of thing. I think that's why that one hit so well with a lot of us.
See, I didn't like that.
Well,
I wasn't a huge fan of that, to be honest.
there was a missing element of strong female characters in that game. Eris wasn't with you, and that's I agree with you guys 100%. Is that it was missing an element of something.
I think it's just that contrast. It's not necessarily.
Yeah, but there was none of it throughout almost the entire game.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was weird that way.
I think the story lacks depth of that contrast.
No, and that's I would 100% agree. I didn't dig the whole story, but as a the which was the best bromance? Yeah, the Zell one was obviously.
I'm just,
the one,
I mean,
Yeah,
I just
yeah.
Kane
that
was not
always
with
funny.
Kane was not with
Not with-
Cecil when he went up to make that change. So it kind
It
of
is
blows
hard.
up my story.
Yeah.
So real quick, Cullen, we're getting towards the end of musings and conspiracies. I think as time wise goes.
Yep.
Yep.
I'm gonna toss a real quick one for the next 10 minutes here, though. Is conspiracies, real quick. The ending of 10. Okay, Final Fantasy 10. You guys remember the ending credits and all that at the very end, and I know you, Ross and I have played 10-2, right?
Mm-hmm.
Colin, did you play through that?
I played a little bit, but I did not play much.
I know. It's like 13. You step into it and you're like, oh god, what have I?
This was weird.
So the end of 10, the final scene, basically, you don't know if you're alive. You don't know if you're dead. You don't know if you're in the same world. You don't know if you're in past time.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know if you're in the future. But you're there. That's all that the scene basically shows, that you survived somehow and you're there. Now, the easy answer to that would be that you join the world of Orin and Lord Brock, right? Jekt, thanks, and all of that. So that would be the easy answer. Is that.
So you're essentially a spirit on the far plane.
Right, but that's been a topic a bunch too, of like what happened at the end of 10. If 10-2 didn't exist, let's say, I don't know if that matters to you guys, but if 10-2 didn't exist at the end of 10, what happened? Yeah.
Well, at the end, and I see Dyson. We'll have you on the show because I know you love X2. He says debatably the best of the series. I don't know if that is hyperbole, but I know he loves X2. But knowing at the end of 10 how you kind of realize that things weren't always what they seem.
Yeah.
I feel like when you replay it, and I know this doesn't really answer the question.
I might need to just go back. Yeah.
I know this doesn't really answer the question, but it gives me the same feeling when I replay it as when, after the first time I watched Fight Club,
Sure.
when I watched it again.
Sure.
Knowing what I knew
Yeah.
made me view the game differently
I can
in
see
how
that
I saw it. Because in Fight Club,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, this
wait.
Tyler Durden is
Yeah, right.
Not
Oh, wait,
real.
let me reset
Yeah.
all the characters in my mind and go, okay, these two characters is the same, basically. So, yeah. I mean, I guess I just need to replay that one again. I played it a few times, but every time I see the ending of 10, and you see him kind of smile and then just kind of run into the scene, kind of just, fades to the nice ocean, sunset or whatever.
Gives Jekt a high five.
Yeah, and
love you, Dad.
and yeah, and you're
Yeah.
going, okay.
It's all good. You try to kill
Yeah,
me as sin, but
like, so is this like real or anyway? So that was a conspiracy I was thinking of.
and then 10-2 doesn't help because it's like
It does
choose
not help
your ending.
at all, because apparently in 10-2, as Dice, Dice, you're probably thinking this too, is like there's that weird like semi-quasi
But you get to pick.
Titus, right? Yeah, and then you're just like, what?
You get to pick what happens. I mean,
What?
maybe he's dead depending on what you choose to do in the game,
Oh,
or
man.
he's alive and he comes
Right,
back to
so
life.
that's
To
a
me, he
bugger.
should have died. It would have been a much. I mean, that finality. The best Final Fantasies have a sense of finality in them.
Yeah,
Clean death.
Yeah.
I agree. The ambiguity
it was a weird one.
is a little frustrating sometimes. But you know what? It gives us something to talk about.
It's like
There
what
you
dreams
go.
may come with Robin Williams. Just tell me what's going on.
Brain hurty.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's see. I think that's probably as good a place to stop
That's a
as
good
Take a
place to
quick break
stop.
here.
Yeah.
take a quick break and see what the night holds. So, this is us wrapping up episode 4. I want to be your canary. I want to thank our Twitch audience, which happens to be, well, it happens to be you, Dyson. And I don't know that it's anybody else, but it is cool to have someone to interact with. And
Good hanging out, buddy.
yeah, thanks for hanging out.
There always has to
man.
be a first.
And you know what? This is ours. So, all right. Well, you know what? It's been real.
It's been fun.
It's been real fun.
Hi, Mom.
Hi, Mom.
See you guys.
Have a good night.